You have your timer, right?
I
Yes.
have the timer,
Okay.
yes.
Cool.
Welcome, Columbus. I'm sorry. Welcome, Columbus. Welcome back to Ask Our Parent Coach. This show is brought to you by Working with Parents, Central Ohio's leading parenting experts and coaches, where we create a safe place for parents to seek help, support on topics such as parenting, communication, relationships, and emotional intelligence. I'm Terry Manrique.
And I'm Alina Greif. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Terry.
Good morning. So today we're going to talk a little bit about relationships and communication and kind of educate you a little bit about where we're getting our information. And where we're getting our information is from the Gottman Institute, Dr. John Gottman. And today we're going to learn about positive communication strategies and how you can baby-proof your relationship before and after children, right? Because it has a profound effect on your relationship. And why it's so important to learn the effective ways to communicate early on in your relationship and how that has a direct impact on young children and how they learn to communicate as they grow up, right? So one of the things about Dr. Gottman and that what we learned from his program and training is that he has over 40 years of research-based concepts, right? And in Seattle, he started a love lab where he studied over 3,000 couples and families. And from his research, he was able to identify the masters from the disasters.
And I love the way he calls
Yes,
both of those
yes,
categories.
and it makes so much sense. So he started focusing on, well, let's learn from the masters
Mm-hmm.
and what are they doing correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we spread this out to other couples.
Right. And how can we avoid some of the disasters in the relationship so that your relationship doesn't end up in that category?
Yes, because we don't want to have a disaster in our relationship, and we don't want to have a disaster in our parenting when we're raising kids, right?
Absolutely.
So it all kind of intertwines with each other.
Yeah, and I think what I found so astounding is that John Gottman has the ability to predict up to 94% accuracy which couples will end up together, which couples will stay together and which couples will end up being divorced. And I think that alone is just an astounding statistic. And this is something they've done through many, many years of research, 40 years of research. Over a long period of time, 30,000 couples were studied, as Terry said, in a lab. So he was able to predict with such astounding accuracy which couples were just not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on that information, he developed a program to, again, all research-based on what really works and what really makes relationships succeed,
Yes.
where couples actually stay together. And I think that's why both Terry and I were so excited to become educators and got certified to teach, Gottman methodology for relationships and for, bringing baby home and for new parents.
Yeah. And I think during our training at the Gottman Institute and studied some of their philosophies is how it impacted myself, and I'm sure this. I know Lena, I've had many conversations how it actually has impacted on the way we view things. And for my personal experience, I've been married. My husband and I have been married for 25 years, together for 28, and parenting, relationship, it's work, right? And I think that's what I gravitated so much from Dr. Gottman is he's a realist. Right?
Yes.
And he's not saying that, we're going to bring in roses and make this perfect, because there's no such thing. It is about work and hard work and being intentional, though. And I think that's what I learned the most from him is that you have to be intentional in what you're putting out there, and that you have to concentrate on putting in the work.
Absolutely. And there is no relationship that can really succeed without both partners, putting in the work and understanding the importance of, rituals of connection or some of the other concepts that Dr. Gottman teaches. And I think, as I was also in the same training that Terry was, just personal experience with that is there's this really interesting exercise called creating a love map. And that's basically really trying to understand how well do you really know your partner. We all think that we do know everything there is to know about, our spouse or our partner. But in reality, there's so many questions we never think of asking them.
And they're simple questions.
Yes,
that's what I love about it.
Nothing is complicated.
It's not a complicated process, right? And this is from, these are two psychologists, professionals, right? So Dr. John Gottman and his wife, Julie Gottman, these are, psychologists, relationship experts. And their theory is so simple, and that's what I love about it. And they ask, they have these love card decks, right? And they ask such simple questions, but they're still questions that you just never think about, right? To take the time to sit with your partner and have these conversations. I mean, as simple as, again, as parent coaches, you and I do this all the time, right? Where we ask, the parents, are you on the same page, and what does that look like for you?
And most of all, they think they're on the same page, but when you really start to dig for it, you realize they've never talked about so many of the issues that come up, right?
Yeah. Do we believe in
private schools?
Yeah. Do we believe in the allowance?
Yes. What is our theory, or how do we want to handle punishments? Do we believe in this?
Do we believe in curfew?
Yes.
Rules. Do we want to have rules for our kids?
What about social media? Wait, how old should our son be before we give him a cell phone? Wait, we've never talked about that.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing that I talk about too in our books, this is from our books too, is that there's things that happen in our relationship that are unspoken. And when you start to develop a relationship, there are unspoken rules, right? We all have rules, but they really are unspoken rules. And we don't start to develop those rules, and the same applies to your parenting. You don't start to develop these rules until things start to come up in the relationship.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And you don't start coming up with rules until things come up in your parenting.
Right. And then you try to do course correction.
Correct.
Right?
And then, but the bad thing is that if you don't have a plan of action ahead of time in your parenting, this reflects on your child. Therefore, your child starts to understand who they can manipulate, right? So that's why when you understand how to do these concepts early on in your relationship, of how to start developing what your rules are for your relationship. For instance, let's give an example. One of the rules is, can my partner go and buy a car without having a conversation with me first?
And if they cannot, what is the minimum amount they can spend without consulting the other person, right? Like, it's just, what is that amount?
What's that budget? Do we
have
a budget?
Yes. Is it $100? What if I want to buy shoes for $150? Should I tell my husband, or should I tell him after the fact?
Yeah, exactly. Right? And you have to realize you were two individuals who didn't need to report to anybody, and all of a sudden now these two individuals are slowly becoming one, and now you're becoming a family of one to a family of three. So now we're actually complicating our life by adding to our family, right?
Yes.
But when you don't have a strategy and you don't know how to manage simple daily stressors or conversations, as you grow your family, as you develop a family and you have a new infant coming into this picture, things get heightened.
And I think just keeping in mind that statistically, the first 7 years of a child's life, there's right now it's more than 50% chance that the parents will get divorced.
And that's high.
And that's a staggering statistic, right? Even if you take 50%, the fact that 1 out of 2 couples who has a child from 0 to 7 is going to end up divorced is kind of a very sobering.
And what are those numbers going to be for your children?
Right.
And that's what our goal is here too, is that we want to start changing that pattern. Because another thing that we learned from our training is that 69%,
yes,
of arguments
Yes.
are perpetual.
Yes, and what that means is that no matter who you choose and no matter who your partner will be, 60% of your arguments will never be resolved. You're always going to have that 69% of arguments that are just going to keep going. They're going to be different arguments, but you're still going to have issues that you cannot resolve.
Yeah.
And the reason Dr. Gottman says that is so is when you enter into a relationship, you bring your own past experience, your own ways of the way you were raised with you, right? So your personality, how you were parented, your cultural upbringing, your social class, where you grew up, what region, all of those characteristics define those things that made you who you are. So because your partner, even if you come from the same culture, is very likely grew up in a different type of household with different rules, maybe different region altogether.
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing with them their own personality, their own ways of being, and those ways of being are not going to be the same as yours.
Right.
So you're always going to have that 69% of things you cannot resolve. But the key is, how do you talk about it?
Right.
How do you come to some kind of compromise? How do you resolve conflict for those 69%, right?
And do you have the tools to, do you have the tools to, cope?
Mm-hmm.
Have the ability to problem solve,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you have the ability to cope through your emotions? Do you have the ability to learn to listen?
Mm-hmm.
Just listen and not talk, right? So, you have to learn these skills for yourself, for your partner, and your children will naturally pick up on these skills, and you will naturally be teaching your children these skills.
Yes, because your kids are going to mirror what they see in a home, right? I always like to tell my family and my kids, and something I really believe in, you are responsible for the energy you bring into the room, right? So you're responsible for the energy you create in your family. You're responsible for the dynamic, for what your kids perceive as a healthy way of communicating. And hopefully it's a healthy way of communicating and not, a disaster. Dr. Gottman calls them in the home.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're going to internalize.
Yeah. And the truth is, we're all emotional human beings,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we cannot change. That
Mm-hmm.
is who we all are. And we're not saying that relationships, that you, and again, Dr. Gottman is a realist. We're realists as well. I know I still have heated emotional conversations with my husband.
So do I.
But we know how to come together while we're in it, right? We know that sometimes when we're in this conversation, either of tears or of anger or just this emotional, roller coaster
Mm-hmm.
that we're in. I mean, because women are, unfortunately, we are sometimes
Mm-hmm.
unpredictable, and we just, that is the truth. The women are hard to understand. We're complicated human beings. But you have to learn to say, what, this is not just about me, this is not just about you, this is about us. And what do we need to do to take a break
Mm-hmm.
from this conversation, take some time to go for a walk, go listen to some music, go maybe do something that's going to distract you from the conversation that you're in, and then come together again and say, let's start again, and be reasonable
Yes.
about how we're communicating
And
with each
how
other.
do you not turn that time away, right, into stonewalling? As Dr. Gottman calls, stonewalling one of those things that occurs in the relationship sometimes as, one of the main issues or predictors of demise of the relationship, right? Stonewalling is basically you're just not talking to each other. You're not dealing with the issue at hand. You're just kind of pretending it's not there, kind of burying
avoiding the situation.
You're just avoiding it, and you're just not dealing with this at all, right?
Which is somewhat of your childish mannerisms that come into reality, into your
Yes.
adulthood, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that's what a child would do. A teen, let's say,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So those are some of those tendencies that come out from us from when we were children, or what we saw happened, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we're reflecting it from somewhere.
Yes.
We learned that from somewhere. And who
Yes.
did we learn that from, and where did we pick that up from? And so when you start to recognize those things, it's easier for you to work through it and let your partner help you work through it, or you work through it together through these series of, well, we do workshops for this, right? We do group coaching for this, so that we can give the training for parents of how do you work through, how to not become a stonewaller, right?
Not become a statistic.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when we work with families, what we do differently, Terry and I, is that we approach relationships in a family in a very holistic way. We look at how are the partners communicating with each other. Is there a lot of conflict? Is there a lot of disagreement? Are they able to manage those conflicts? Again, conflict regulation and conflict resolution is going to be in every single relationship. You're going to have to do it, because there will be no relationship that I've ever seen where there's no conflict. And I think it's very unhealthy otherwise.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you resolve those conflicts in a way that sets up your family for success and sets up your kids for success, right? Because we know, again, based on research, that the quality of your relationship has a very direct impact on your children's emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right?
Very much so. And I've seen this over and over again. I see and I've noticed that, when you work with a family, you notice that the relationship has an effect on your kids, and your kids have a effect on your relationship, right? It's all the same. You cannot separate that at all. So that's why, we believe in that holistic approach when we work with families, that it's super important for us to work with both the parenting aspect and the relationship aspect, because one cannot work without the other.
Yes.
Right? It's
yes.
so intertwined, and you cannot separate those. As much as you want to, you really can't separate those. So if you're having issues on parenting, you want to look into how you're managing your relationship. If you're having complications in your relationship,
how are you approaching parenting?
Yeah. It's you can't have one hand without the other. Right. And if you do, then it's unbalanced, right? And so you have to look at the whole fabric of the family, and that's really what it is. One cannot do without the other, and that's why that's why we really believe in that holistic approach. So one of the things that we understand about children is that they start to, and parents want to always ask, how what is it that I'm doing that is going to impact my child when they're growing up, and what is going to create them to be successful later on in life? What are some things that I need to collect? What is some information? And one of the things of the research that's done by Dr. Gottman is that it's not in their IQ, it's not in their achievement tests, it's not in their ACT scores, but it's actually how they get along with others socially, how they're treated, how they treat each other, how you treat each other in the family household, and how they see how you're treating your partner, right? It's all connected. And so from his research, one of the things that he studied is that when he studied families who are really stressed in the household, and there's a lot of high conflict, that this has a very direct impact on the child. In fact, they wanted to go a little further to see how much of an impact this had on the children, right?
That's a very good question.
And what they did is they did a urine test sample from the child.
Oh.
Yes.
So what were they looking
And they
for?
did
Stress?
this as young as 2 years old.
Okay.
And what they found is that children measure a high level of stress hormones
when there's a lot of conflict.
In the home.
Yeah.
And that, again, when you have those high level stress hormones in a child's body, it comes out in a very misdirected
right?
way.
Anger, behavioral issues.
Right. So you start to have all these negative behaviors from your child because they don't know how to handle all of this stress. So it has a huge impact on the child and their behavior.
And sometimes, I think that is so crucial for us to make sure that families and parents understand this correlation. Sometimes parents come to us and it's all about like fix my child, my child is doing this, my child is doing that, fix them, it's their problem, it's not my problem. And we try to explain to parents that you have to look at this, what is going on in the home that's causing the child to act like this, behave like this. Let's look at everything holistically. Let's look at some challenges you're having, possibly, right, maybe communicating. But all of this is so important for them to really feel like it's a cohesive family unit, like they feel like they belong. Something that I always say, and I think I can't remember who said that first, but what every child wants to know is, can you hear me? Can you see me? Do I matter?
Yes.
Those are the 3 fundamental questions for every child, actually every adult too. But, in the family, just ask yourself, take a moment to think about it for a second. Do I see you, you being my child? Do I hear you? Do I behave to let you know that you matter? Because those are the 3 things that the kids really need their parents to honor and respect, that those are fundamental needs of a human being, especially a little human being.
Yep.
Growing up, right? But if you're so busy trying to manage stress and whatever conflict you have in the home, it's very likely that those 3 fundamental needs for a child are just not being met.
Well, and the thing is too, I think what I love about the program that we provide is that, when you have children who are, acting out, right, hyperactive, you want to find out what's wrong with my child, right? What's the diagnosis for my child? And really, most of the diagnosis from your child is a reflection of the increased stress that's happening in the relationship or in the household, right? So when you take your child who is the hyperactive child, there's a strong-willed child, and say, let's take them to an earlier intervention, let's take them to a behavior specialist, that child tends to start to look at themselves as there's something wrong with me, right? And that's not the case. The case is that there's something wrong with the family, and we have to work together as a family to change what we're all doing.
Yeah, something is not working, right? What is it that's not working, and how can we do better? When you know more, you do better, right? So that's always been our philosophy, which is why, we work with parents, we teach, we train, we coach, because we believe that information is vital, and when parents really understand, they learn new techniques, new tools, they understand the importance of connection, they understand the importance of really good communication, then they will do better in the home.
Well, and not just that though, I mean, I think when you start to resolve and learn how to build a strong relationship within your partner, again, it's all about modeling, right? And if you're modeling to your children early on and start changing these generational patterns, the likeliness for your child, first of all, the likeliness of you ending up in a divorce is less.
Diminished, much,
right?
much diminished.
And then
Absolutely.
the likeliness for your child to end up in this situation is less as well, right? And it breaks my heart, because I've had some clients when I work with families in the household, and I have a 8-year-old tell me, and I'm sitting there having a conversation with this 8-year-old, and they say, I wonder what the name of my 3rd husband will be. I mean, she's already predicting this in her life of what that looks like. That's sad to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I
Can you imagine hearing that? Like, she's already putting herself in a position knowing that marriage is not something that's going to work, right? And you know what? It's hard work. I mean, 25 years later, we've done counseling 6 different times, and counseling's great, but I think being more proactive and doing relationship coaching, I think makes, having 2 partners to model for you what, and I just, I cannot say enough about Dr. Gottman. I think his philosophy is phenomenal, and I think what we learned from him is extraordinary.
Yes, I totally agree, which I think is a perfect segue to talk about our free classes that we are going to be teaching through Dublin Parent University. The title of the class or the workshop is Why the Quality of Your Relationship Has a Direct Impact on Your Children's Emotional Intelligence. We're going to be teaching those classes. There are 3 dates we currently have on the schedule. I'll tell you real quick, but you can register online through Dublin City Parent University. The dates are March 5th, March 19th, and April 20th, 7 to 8 p.m. It's going to be held at Emerald Campus, and all the information and the flyer is on Dublin City Schools Parent University website. You can also contact us at Working with Parents to get some more information on the upcoming classes. As we said, the 1-hour class is free.
And it's on our Facebook
And
event
it's on our
page as
yes,
well. So if you
yes.
need to find it there.
You can find it there,
yeah.
and you can register
Yeah,
there.
you can register
there's
there
a link
too.
to register
Yep.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this was a great
yeah.
conversation. I really hope you learned, some great tips and tools today from our conversation. And we want to continue this and bring you those the resources that you need moving forward. So
to make your family a
yeah.
success.
So that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. If you have any questions and you want us to answer any of your questions, feel free to submit your information to info@ourparentcoach.com. You can also visit our website at workingwithparents.com, and remember to apply the CPR philosophy with compassion, patience, and respect with everyone you come in contact with. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time, and we can't wait to talk to you again next week.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good one, guys.